On Wednesday, August the 23rd, 1944, a plane crashed into a school in a Lancashire village of Freckleton, killing 61 people. An American B-54 bomber landed on the infant's wing of Holy Trinity School, killing 38 young children between the ages of 4 and 6. The plane broke up, sending a huge fireball hurtling down the road. Now, 80 years on, Shots TV looks back at what was the single greatest civilian air disaster suffered by the Allies in the Second World War. We'll meet the 2 remaining survivors who were both pupils in infant class when the disaster happened. And look at how this terrible accident, which wiped out an entire generation of a village, also brought the community together and created enduring friendships with the American Air Force. Angela Proctor's mum, Edna Lonsdale, was pregnant with her when tragedy struck on the morning of August 23, 1944. Among the victims was Georgina Lonsdale, the 4-year-old elder sister Angela never knew. Angela was born in early 1945, but the tale of her sister and the lasting mark the tragedy left on the village have been clear memories for her for as long as she can remember.
It was a beautiful morning, and my father was on leave, and he'd taken the children to school. Georgina, who was my sister, and Judy, my cousin, come at 10 o'clock, the skies darkened, and there was this absolutely dreadful storm. And then, of course, the accident happened, and it was just, must have been complete chaos from then on. One of the American Liberator bombers crashed on the school in the most dreadful storm, the sort of storm that people said at the time they'd never seen the like of before or since. And the aeroplane crashed through a cafe and houses and ended up wrecking the reception class of the school. This, my mother told us, was part of the aeroplane that crashed on the school. The head teacher, Mr. Billington, managed to get the children out onto a field that was behind the school, but they thought all the children were out. But then, of course, they realised to their horror that what the infant class, the reception class, as we would call it now, weren't out at all, and they were the children that were killed. There were 1 or 2 survivors, and 2 of them are still alive. And as you can see, this is very old paper, and this was how they identified Georgina as part of her dress. And that's what they brought to the house to identify her.
The Freckleton Air Disaster wiped out a whole generation, but also brought a village closer together. 61 people died in what was a terrible freak accident. It wasn't just children. The crash also claimed the lives of 2 teachers and 3 US Air Force crew. First Lieutenant Blomendahl, the pilot, Technical Sergeant Jimmy Parr, who was the co-pilot, and Flight Engineer Sergeant Gordon Kinney. Staff and customers in the Sad Sack Cafe, sheltering from the storm, also died. It's a tragedy that the people of Freckleton and also the US Air Force have never forgotten. Each year a memorial service is held honouring everyone who died on that day. In 2024, a blue plaque was blessed in the village, right here, which is where the school once stood. Among those attending were the 2 survivors, Ruby Curell, now 85, and David Madden, who travelled from his home in Swindon to remember his deceased classmates.
I remember it going very dark. There was a real loud bang. Now, in those days, being in wartime, if you heard a big bang, you got under something. Well, I turned round and saw a girl fall out of the desk, and I saw my teacher slump over her desk, and I got under mine. So that's possibly how I come not to have a load of rubble on me. I don't know. And then the next thing I know, there was 2 faces in the doorway. One was the headmaster, and one was an American airman. Now, I didn't know him, I don't know who he was, but they were trying to beckon me out, but I wasn't moving. I don't even know whether I could have moved. I was just under my desk, and I suppose I must have felt safe.
I remember the thunderstorm approaching and it getting dark, and they switched the lights on, and it became quite noisy. I think the teachers thought he'd been struck by lightning. And there were 2 teachers there, and they looked at each other, and I realised, even at the age of 5, that something was significant here. And we stopped doing what we were doing in the class and started singing nursery rhymes, presumably to distract us and, what's going on. But eventually, the room was filling with smoke, and they decided to evacuate us.
It was very smoky and very hot. That was it. That's all I remember. I don't even remember the pain. And I must have been in pain because I started making a lot of noise.
The teacher said, "One line, go out," and they went out. And I was looking at my teacher, and she wasn't saying my line to go out. And I kept on looking, I'd like to go out. And then she slowly fainted, and her head on the desk. And I realised that I wasn't being looked at anymore. I wasn't being watched. As a small child, you're always being watched to make sure you're doing things properly. I could do what I wanted. I wanted to go outside. So I ran outside into the lane behind, and there was a truck there, khaki truck. I squeezed round beside it, and as I got to the far side, a man came round from the other side and said, "Got you." And I thought, damn it, these grown-ups always get in the way, And he gathered me up and put me into the back of what was an ambulance in camouflage. In going through the flames, I suffered burns to my arm and my legs. In the building, it was just smoke, heavy smoke, when I was in there. When I went out to go outside, it was through into another space where there were some big doors which were open. But all round the door frame, it was flaming like that. But in the middle, there was a black hole. So I thought, through the hole, and I ran through the hole. But obviously, the heat was there to affect my skin.
We had to be got to a hospital quickly. The nearest one was the American base hospital, because the nearest one of our own was Lytham. The other one was Preston, which was 7 miles the other way, so no, they took us to the base hospital, because it was their ambulances that came to pick us up. And they took us there, and we were looked after there up until February of the following year. And then in February, I was taken down to Altrincham in Cheshire, to the hospital there. It was a military hospital.
I was in the airfields casualty unit for a few days, and then I think I went to Preston Hospital, and then Manchester Hospital, and then it was decided to transfer me to the East Grinstead Burns unit, and that is where I think I received treatment. I remember sitting on a plank across the top of a galvanised tank full of cold, salty water. And there was a nurse there, and she was bathing my arms with salt water. And I remember sitting on this plank with and the skin was peeled, was black and so on. And she was bathing this, taking bits of skin off. That treatment I remember. My legs were bandaged, and I remember there was muslin bandages and a woolen bandage around the outside, and they were changed every day, and they went away and got washed and came back.
The doctor used to come to do the dressings, and they had these big sterilised cylinders with the stuff in, and he said, "Now," he said, "I want you to watch the nurse." He said, "And when she takes the lid off," he said, "you have to watch for the gremlins." So, of course, I'm looking for gremlins. But while I'm looking for gremlins, he's doing the business with the dressings. And I had no idea what he was doing. But he got away with it.
In part 2, we look at how the community of Freckleton bounced back to give the surviving infants the best possible childhood despite the tragedy. And we hear how an unlikely romance blossomed between a bereaved mother and the American airman who carried her daughter's coffin. The Freckleton Air Disaster wiped out a whole generation, but it also brought the people in the village closer together. For those who survived, life in Freckleton would never be the same. The village mourned the 61 people who died in what was a terrible freak accident. It affected everyone. Barely a person escaped without losing a child, a sibling, relative or friend.
I mean, we lost, obviously, my sister, but we also lost 2 cousins and 2 half-cousins and lots of my mother's friends, children too, you know. So there was a whole loss amongst the whole community. Yeah.
Infant teacher.
Oh, and the infant teacher, yes. It was her second day at school, Jenny, and she was my mum's best friend, so that hurt too.
As I talk to survivors and families at the 80th anniversary service, it becomes very, very clear that nobody blamed the Americans for what happened. There were no bad feelings towards them at all. The US Air Force also lost a number of men after all, and it was just an incredibly tragic and unpreventable accident. The Americans went to great lengths to rebuild the village, determined to put things right. They quickly began turning an area of land into a beautiful memorial garden and children's playground, which was opened in August 1945. They installed a stone plaque with an inscription that reads, "This playground presented to the children of Freckleton by their neighbours of Base Air Depot No. 2 USA Air Force, in recognition and remembrance of their common loss in a disaster of August the 23rd, 1944.
My sister, who was 3 at the time, she would say she had a wonderful upbringing because the whole village helped look after her and take her on walks. And the American soldiers, they had lots of parties for the children and lots going on. And she looks back on those times as, nobody wanted her or any of the other children who survived to feel that they were being brought up surrounded by grief. As my mother said, they had to bring the children that were left had to be brought up, and they wanted us. It wasn't that they tried to hide it; they didn't. But we had happy childhoods. They did everything they could to try and make it as easy as possible. But it must have been terrible for them.
The funeral took place on August the 26th, 1944. American servicemen carried the children's coffins, prepared the grave, and later erected a granite cross and plinth with all the names of those buried in the grave. Angela also lost a cousin, Judy, in a disaster. And there was double heartbreak for Judy's mum, Angela's Aunt Janie, who also lost her husband in the war. But in a twist of fate, Janie would end up marrying the American serviceman who carried Judy's coffin.
Our Aunt Janie, who had the week of the accident, she found out, or rather the family found out, and then they had to tell her that her husband had been killed in Normandy. So she'd lost her child and her husband within the week. So as you can imagine, that was really dreadful. The Americans were encouraged to visit the families of the bereaved children, and they had carried the coffins for the children. And Judy's coffin was carried by an Air Force, American Air Force man called Alec. So anyway, Alec came to visit the family because they were encouraged to go and see if they could help. And I suppose it was almost like a public relations exercise. Anyway, he came to the butcher's shop and he was made very welcome, and he eventually met Jane, and he fell madly in love with her. And to cut a long story short, he ended up marrying her, and she went over to America on the Queen Mary with a lot of other GI brides. After the war, this was, of course, and made a new life in America. She travelled all over the world with the man that I think of as Uncle Alec. And the American Air Force, of course. She lived in Japan, the Philippines, all over the place. And yes, and had 2 children and made a success of her life in America.
I had some wonderful times in America. When I go to America, you'd think I was royalty, but I'm not. I'm very ordinary. But they just can't do enough for me. As long as as soon as they know who I am and what I'm there for, that's it. Everything is laid on and done for me, and they're just wonderful.
Here at the Holy Trinity Churchyard, a communal grave was dug in the shape of a T. Here, the majority of the child victims were buried, along with teacher Miss Jenny Hall and a number of civilians who were killed in a snack bar. During today's emotional service, members of the public were invited to stick yellow flowers on a large wooden cross, one to represent each person who perished. But as the accident fades deeper into history, It's down to the remaining few survivors to keep the memory of those victims alive. While 85-year-old Ruby gives talks to local schools and community groups, Angela has put it all down on paper and published a novel called Children of the Storm.
I wrote it really for the family. I wanted the family to know the story and how it was very difficult for our parents, and how they had the courage to get through it all. I wanted the children to know, and I thought if I write it in a book, they'll read the book and hopefully they'll understand. I didn't want the children to feel upset or bad about it. It's just, but I wanted them to know, it's a story, and a story about how sometimes terrible grief and bad things happen, but people come through it, don't they?
All those who will be remembered by name today, comfort with gentleness all who are gathered here. Thank you for the love we can never be separated from, for although they are gone from our sight, they cannot be gone from our hearts. When the dark shadows fall, may we let the quietness come upon us and trust the strength of your embrace supporting us, for you hold together all that is in heaven and on earth. Amen.
Amen.
The war poet Wilfred Owen, in one of his finest, most beautiful poems, Strange Meeting, used the phrase, the undone years. The undone years are the years wasted because someone has been lost as a result of war. And it's impossible not to ask ourselves, for these 61 people we remember today, what those undone years might have brought. Where would they have lived? What might their work have been? How might they have contributed to their community or to their church? Who would they have married? What would their children or their grandchildren have looked like? It seems such a pitiful waste of life and of opportunity. The undone years, so many unfulfilled possibilities.